Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for. In Dallas, we continue to have a number of business and commercial litigation opportunities, a couple of construction litigation positions, an M&A opportunity, and then a plaintiff and personal injury attorney as well. In Austin, family law and special education, still areas that we're looking for, as well as in Tarrant County and Fort Worth, where we're looking for a family lawyer, as well as a real estate attorney. And then in Houston, a personal injury attorney and an insurance defense attorney. So a lot of options all over the state. If any of these sound interesting to you, or maybe perhaps to a friend or a colleague, please get in touch with me. Daniel at varsitysearch.com. Would love to visit about it. All right, today we are in Dallas, where our guest is Jessica Mullins-Ta. Jessica is a partner with the corporate immigration firm Berry Appleman Leiden, where she helps clients obtain non-immigrant visas and represents employers of all sizes with labor certification cases. Beyond the corporate world, Jessica has also worked with individuals in family immigration matters, such as family-based petitions and K visas. Jessica has presented on corporate immigration topics at a number of conferences and CLEs and is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And just this week, a few days ago, she was recognized as a Best Lawyers in America by the Best Lawyers in America. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Jessica Mullins-Ta on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Jessica Mullins-Ta joins us right now. Jessica, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
No problem, Daniel. Happy to be here.
Well, let's start off by just hearing a little bit about you and your practice and your firm. Tell us what you all do.
So I work for Berry Appleman Leiden. We are a corporate immigration firm. So we specialize in immigration matters where we essentially generally represent companies in bringing their employees to the U.S., getting them permanent residence, visas, et cetera, so they can work.
Yeah. And how did you get into that area? Is that something that you started off doing, or did you find yourself there later? Talk about that a little bit.
So I fell into it.
Yeah.
I actually had just graduated from Baylor, which has, a great litigation program, and was initially brought on to assist with some litigation matters that were underway at the firm, and just ended up staying and kind of continued on and grew and expanded my practice within that. I did removal proceedings initially, again, because of some litigation background that we had, and then expanded into just more of the straightforward corporate side and making some great connections and relationships with some awesome programs, and just kind of stayed in it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that's neat. And so I know that there's never anything changing or going on in the immigration world, so we can skip over that question, right?
Yeah, it's very, very stable. Nothing happens.
Right.
It is so dynamic, and it's so interesting that honestly, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Yeah. There's always going to be an impact.
Right.
And some presidents are really concerned about enforcement, some about regulation, some about application of the current law. And even when nothing is actually changing, there's still changes, just even in how the agencies apply it. And so it's so interesting. Even something as innocuous as budget issues. So maybe there's a hiring freeze. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't really impact what's going on, but it tremendously does, because then you have backlogs and applications, and It's very interesting, and my husband often tells me that nobody finds immigration law as interesting as I do. So I try not to bore people at parties about it. I've been warned,
Right.
But there's more. It's so nuanced, and there's so much more that goes on than people even realize.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. What's obviously recognizing that it's always changing and it's a very dynamic area. What in the last few months, maybe, or last 6 months has been what's been top of mind for you and your clients, and what the folks coming over from the different countries have been facing and dealing with? What's sort of the latest?
So essentially what's been happening is that, most of the embassies are shut down.
Yeah.
Right. Ironically, India is usually a country from which it's very difficult to get visas to come. It has actually been one of the most open places prior to that COVID wave hitting in spring. Right.
Yeah.
As a result of that wave, India completely shut down. There's people who were actually there for brief visits or to visit sick family members that are now stuck. And other embassies, because of the summer months, have completely canceled any appointments that somebody might have been able to get. So London, for example, huge embassy. What we are seeing, unfortunately, is that businesses are no longer satisfied with pausing travel, right? So we have C-levels, we have vice presidents. We have, frankly, even just business consultants who have a business need to come and travel to the U.S. and they haven't been able to from many, many countries in the world,
right?
Unless they route through some other places. So what we've seen is, frankly, even just this week, we've seen the Department of State relax some of the national interest exception restrictions. So for people who are banned from entering the U.S. because of where they've been, we've seen some lessening of those restrictions. And then we've also very, very recently seen that they have expanded some of those waivers to include, instead of being 30 days, one entry to the U.S., it's now 12 months, multiple entries. So I think businesses are going to start feeling a lot of relief for those business personnel that really do need to come and travel to the U.S. repeatedly for business purposes. I mean, business meetings, et cetera. So I've already seen it. My firm represents very high profile companies, and everyone was understanding at first. Right. And I think now what you're seeing is people need to move and we need to operate. And so hopefully we continue to see a little bit easing of restrictions from this point forward.
Sure. The last thing I was going to ask you about, just your firm and then just in the area in general, do you see that, as you mentioned, and as we've talked before, a number of your clients are large, well-known, high-profile clients. And is that where a lot of the corporate immigration is concentrated? Or are there needs and areas where all through the economy at the mid-level and even at the small business level where the same issues are happening and the same needs for people from overseas to come in on work visas or other types of relationships are needed, or is it really concentrated at the top of what you'd see at of the market cap scale?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think it depends on what type of visa you're looking at. Okay, right? In terms of standard business meetings, somebody who's sitting in London who needs to come over here just for a quick meeting with a client or, with people, a lot of times that is going to probably be a larger company, right? But in terms of trying to find workers, right? So maybe not your C-levels, but really find workers to come and fill positions. There is an absolute under availability of STEM U.S. workers. Period. There just is. And so all sizes. I actually currently work with both large and mid-sized clients that are, some people might think are a bit smaller, than some of the other like big names out there. Right. But across the board, you can't find enough tech workers to do the jobs. Period. So, I actually started my career working for kind of more of, it was a boutique firm, but working with kind of mom and pop organizations that really needed this, to fill openings that they had. And the thing is that everybody is reliant on these types of visas that are available for people. We're talking oil and gas, government. We're talking universities, higher education institutions, research organizations, it's government contractors, especially. So it's a situation that a lot of times I think people think, oh, it's the big names,
right.
It's the this, it's the that, but it's really across the board. And it's also across the board in a lot of different areas. Obviously tech is huge. Yeah. Tech does a lot. Yeah. But like I said, oil and gas, you've got, business kind of, I don't want to say sales, but, like account executives, et cetera, that might be over, product marketing managers, et cetera. A lot of people, it's just a mobile world.
Yeah.
It really is. And so there are some visas that, allow for when you're an employee at one entity to be able to move a little bit more fluidly through the world. And so those are leveraged a lot by industries across the board. Interesting.
Yeah. Has the evolution of the gig economy, the Fivers or whatever of the world, has that changed, or has that impacted the areas that you work in at all? Or is that not really much of an influencer?
I think in a way it is. I mean, when I started practicing, it was post 9/11.
Right.
It was when, I guess we'd already had the .com bust. What we were seeing at that stage was the creation, the growth of Google, Facebook, Amazon. Okay. So big tech was starting to evolve at that, when I started practicing.
Right.
And so before that, especially in Texas, our big players were really your oil and gas companies who have now taken, obviously a bit of a backseat because of economy and demand. Yeah. But I think that the evolution of tech, what types of positions they're looking at, et cetera, those definitely have evolved. You've got machine learning, AI, and those are also, unfortunately, areas where some countries are ahead of us, or at least on par with us in terms of research, et cetera. And some of those countries we don't consider to be very friendly. So you have additional security checks and background checks and complications that arise with that. But I would just like to point out, no real new regulatory checks on those. So it's all, again, just kind of application of how the agencies are treating everybody. One thing that's hot news right now in the world of immigration law is, to get a green card, to get permanent residence to the U.S., it's something that is a huge recruiting tool for every industry. Yep. Schools, employers, private institutions, all of it. Those regulations have been in play for 15, 16 years. Yeah. They literally require you to place a newspaper ad who reads a newspaper in a physical newspaper. Right. And, they're not, it doesn't even make sense in the world that we're in now. And that's unfortunately, I think a lot of what we see is a lot of it's outdated. It can't always keep up with the world, much less with the industries that need it. Right. No, absolutely. I see that New York Times folded up behind you and over there. No, I'm just kidding. She doesn't have a New York Times folded up back there. Okay. Looking back on your early years in practice, you were just referencing those when you were getting started. What's something that you learned at that stage of your career that has stuck with you and continues to be part of how you practice today? I think that the biggest thing I learned and to figure out, and it's one of the hardest things, a lot of attorneys that I've mentored really struggle with this. It's being able to overcome that fear of not knowing. Yeah. I think we come out of law school and I remember, I can't remember who it was, but I remember somebody telling us it's not an if you will be sued for malpractice, it's a when. And I was just terrified by that. Right. And so you realize once you start practicing everything you've been taught, you haven't always been taught exactly what you need to do to be able to put a case forward, right?
Right.
And that, oh gosh, I don't actually know what this answer is. You're taught the tools of how to figure it out and everything, but you don't actually know the answer.
Right.
And
exactly.
That is horrifying. And I think for a lot of us that are in law, like we are that type of personality where we like to know everything.
Yeah.
And once you realize you don't, it's one of the scariest situations. And it's not until it's about 2 years in, is what I tell everybody. After about 2 years, you start to at least get comfortable with it.
Right.
And realizing it's okay not to know everything and kind of processing that. But that to me was the hardest thing to kind of deal with. And I really struggled. I was like, I can't do this job because I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And it took about 2 years to really get comfortable with it and to be able to process that. So I think to me, that's the most important thing that I figured out.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I hear that quite a bit from lawyers and candidates that I talk with. And so that's definitely still an issue. And so there's hope out there. If you're struggling right now in year 1 and 2, it just get used to it and be comfortable with the uncomfortableness. Right?
Exactly.
And no, absolutely. What about more recently? Is there anything that you've learned or picked up more recently that you wish someone had taken you aside and told you at an earlier point?
Yeah, I think that, I'm a working mom. Yep. And I err on the side of not saying no. Mm-hmm. Right. It's one of those things. And I think a lot of women struggle with this, which is that if I'm awake, like I should be doing something for somebody, right? Yeah. And I got to the point where I would literally, the only time I was not doing, whether it be for kids or for clients especially, was when I was unconscious, asleep. Mm-hmm. And I truly, truly, truly believe that, burnout's a thing. Balance is necessary. Yep. And I have an amazing equity partner that I report to. And she said one of the best things to me, which was one time I said to her, I think I can take more on. And she says, I know you can, but you don't need to. Right. And that was so powerful to be able to have somebody really tell you, I know you can do stuff and I'm impressed with what you can do, but you don't need to keep taking things on. Yeah. And in a way, forcing me to have that balance. Right. And, on LinkedIn, I'm a huge advocate for this, which is that I really do believe that, self-care is something that we do not do traditionally in society, but much less in law. Right. We're taught you have to burn yourself out and then you'll make partner and then it'll, I don't know what happens after that, to be honest, but that's just what you do. Yeah. And I think that there is so much more room for grace and for self-preservation than what we allow ourselves. And I tell you what, I don't think that it gets to a negative point based on, I truly don't believe that there's people out there that are like, work yourself to death. Yeah. I don't think that, but I think that we have to be careful of what we're doing as setting an example to others. Mm-hmm. I tell my team, do not do what I did. Right. I took 6 weeks off for one birth. I took 8 weeks off for the birth of my second child. Don't do that. Take your full mat leave. Yeah. Take it. Yeah. And so it's recognizing when we're actually setting a bad example because of what we're doing to others and trying to recognize that and make those distinctions. Mm-hmm. And also just being aware of when we're, needing additional feedback, asking, hey, do you need me to take on more work? And having those conversations, because what we see, I think a lot, are young attorneys, especially, I think, being very burnt out, looking for career changes because they think it's about the law as opposed to maybe how they're practicing. Mm-hmm. And I know I went through that. I was thinking, I can't do this. And it was really about the how as opposed to the what or the why.
Right.
And once I was able to separate that and kind of process, I was able to get to a place where I was able to say, what is it that I'm looking for? What are the boundaries I do need to set? And I think that that was life-changing in being able to better serve my clients, better serve my family, and frankly, myself.
Yeah. Well, that is so great. And I know there are people listening that needed to hear every word that you just said. And so I'm just so glad that you laid it out like that. It's super important and it doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, I'm glad it's being talked about more now than it used to be, or that it used to. But yeah, especially, you know, and I think it's also helpful for young lawyers to start looking at, I mean, you referenced your equity partner who was so great about that, and was intentional in not giving you more. You know, I think looking for leaders in law firms that have that approach and that mentality is something that going forward is going to be important as our generation starts to take the lead in these firms, and that we are from a leadership standpoint, you know, create environments where it's okay to take your full maternity leave, and it won't hurt you in the scheme of things, and it's not going to set you back on the partnership track. It's not going to set you back on what projects you get or any of that. Like that has to come from the leadership of the firm, and I hope that we'll morph into that and grow into that. But for young lawyers that are listening, like look for those places where that's already happening and where that's already, you know, the reality at some of those places is places you want to get to. Cause I mean, I think I know it's just so hard when you know it's going to cost you if you do those things, you know, it's just hard to do it. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the thing is nobody told me that just take this much time. You know, and I even when I was at a small firm, they said, "How much time do you want to take?" And I was at the time then where, you know, I needed the paycheck. You know, my husband, I was the main breadwinner, and so I was just like, "This is all, you know, the vacation and sick leave. This is all I've got." You know, and then even at the bigger firm, I felt an obligation to my team, to my client, that I was really needed. Mm-hmm. And my boss, same thing. She said, well, tell me what you want to take. But it did not come from anybody else. Nobody said this is all you can have. Right. It was all self-imposed. Yeah. And that's the thing, is realizing that you can seek what you need. Yeah. And what I should have done was should have had a conversation and, you know, empowering people to do so. I think that's exactly what you're referencing. Yeah. Is for me to have felt really empowered and say, hey, I think I do want to take a full 12 weeks and be totally offline and, you know that everything's going to be okay. And I think that is hard.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, because we put the pressure on ourselves and we watch our colleagues do the same thing. And it's hard to know that, you know, oh, well, she had a baby last year and only took 4 weeks, and they, you know, like you start there's comparison that comes into it. So we were talking about this with vacation as well, a little different scenario, but you know, where, we have, you know, take whatever vacation you want as long as you get your hours in, but no one ever does. And, or, you know, so like firms that are starting to look at going towards, you know, no, you have 2 weeks vacation that you absolutely must take. It's part of being a lawyer here at this firm. You have to take your 2 weeks so that people feel free to do it and not, you know, get penalized for it or think that they're going to get set back for it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we actually at our firm just moved to, for all, for certain staff, including attorneys, there is no limit on vacation per se. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And which is great, but we are really having to push to encourage people to take it.
Yeah.
And you know, setting a bad example, I went on vacation a couple of weeks ago, and the thing was, it was one of those, I'm just going to sit at a beach. Mm-hmm. And then I would get bored. And so I would get online and I would ping people. And I was like, I'm setting a bad example. Right. Because now they're going to think they have to work on vacation. Right. Like, don't do what I'm doing. Do you need my help? Right. But okay, I won't do this. You know? Right. And so it is a hard, it is a hard balance, you know, to be available, but then not be setting the bad example. But yeah, it is very similar. You know, what I found to be very helpful though was being part of a firm with offices in California, for example.
Okay.
Because you then are forced to have that good example of, taking a 5-month maternity leave in some cases.
Yeah.
And so that really does help, I think. And at my firm, we actually partner with, we do all of the U.S. inbound immigration, and we partner with Deloitte UK, which does actually the global immigration. They're based obviously in the UK primarily. And their attitude towards vacation has really also empowered me.
Yeah.
And because, you deal with a more global view of time off and everything. And that really starts to help. Oh, they really are going to leave me alone for like the whole week. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. And so I think that having more examples in our lives really does, I hope, help us to accept that it's okay.
Right.
And I don't know, we'll see. But I think to some degree, again, it's the personalities, right? Those of us that get into law, that's usually our personality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the struggle.
No question. That's absolutely right. So you mentioned earlier the team that works for you and with you. I'm curious what you would say when young associates are that you're observing. What's something that stands out in a positive way when you see something in them? What are you looking for that when you see it you think, oh yeah, they're getting it and have a bright future, that kind of thing?
I'm looking for somebody who understands where to start looking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for, in immigration, we have multiple agencies that we deal with. So we have multiple different sets of regulations that we're looking for. To do one case, I may have to follow Department of Labor regulations and then also immigration regulations. And then I may also have something that's specifically, instead of being in like 8 CFR, is in the actual INA itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of sources. And just like all administrative law, there's memos, there's case law, there's, all of it. So what I'm looking for is somebody who comes to me and says, so I have this question or this problem. I think I start here.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really basic and elementary, but that's, to me, so huge to show a first step of the critical identification of like, what agency?
Yeah.
Do you look in the regulations? Do you look in memos?
Yeah.
And that seems really basic, but that's huge to me. It shows me that you're trying.
Yep.
I don't care if you're right or wrong,
right,
but you're trying. And it's not as common as you might think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about something that is a pet peeve or something that you don't appreciate when young lawyers are doing something?
Overconfidence. Overconfidence.
Yeah.
What I tell people is this. Whenever somebody makes a mistake and they freak out, I'm like, listen, I can fix just about everything. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know how to fix it about just for everything because I've probably seen just about everything at this point, right? I've seen all of the worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And so, I have the client who I said, don't go to Cuba. Don't go to Cuba.
Yeah.
Like, just don't.
Right.
And stuck outside the U.S. for over a year for background checks because he went to Cuba on vacation. Like, I've seen it all. If I tell you don't do this,
it just hurts.
It's awful. And so overconfidence, because somebody thinks this probably won't be an issue, because they just haven't seen it blow up, or they don't know enough to know that it is a problem.
Right.
That scares me.
Right.
I'm the type of person where if I'm giving somebody advice and I'm talking somebody through a situation or a company and guiding them through what can happen, I'm going to give them everything.
Yeah.
This can happen, this can happen, this can happen, every eventuality. And if there is something I'm not sure about, I will tell them, let me double check on this.
Right.
And I've had associates who speak very strongly on things that they aren't 100% sure on.
Yeah.
And it can lead to devastating results. What we're doing is not, a bonus for people. it's not just extra windfall. I mean, these are people's lives.
Absolutely.
Right. And so there are situations where family members get stuck outside the U.S. and they can't come, and children age out. They have to leave their families because they're 21 and nobody cares that but they can't stay here, and it can be quite devastating. And so I take it very, very seriously. And so I do think overconfidence terrifies me.
Yep.
And that is, so somebody who comes to me with questions, and the eagerness to learn and an acknowledgement they need to learn, that to me is like a relief versus somebody who says, "Oh, I know everything."
Right.
That scares me because I know I'm still learning. I still grow and learn new things every week as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Gosh, you sent me back about 10 years when I was working in an athletic department in Oregon, and our conference had just brought in Simon Fraser University, which is in Canada, was the first school to be brought into the NCAA. It was in Division II level. And so taking our football team across the border into Canada for the first time, and looking through all of those like rules on like, oh gosh, okay, these guys, like 5 of them have like, in their past some type of like, some type of thing on their record, right?
Gosh,
like, are they going to be able to get back? And what are we going to do if they can't? And like all these things, like, and the coach is worried, we're talking about, what if we can't get across? I'm more worried about them not getting back. And, obviously that
it can be terrifying.
Oh my gosh, it was so nerve wracking. I mean, on the phone as they're getting up to the border and then on the way back, like, are we through? It's like we're staging a jailbreak.
I know it's you don't always know.
No,
I tell you that people think, oh, you do corporate immigration, so it's boring engineers and things, and you don't hear anything interesting. I do.
I believe it.
I do. But and some of my favorite stories that I try to warn people about are things that are somewhat innocuous. It's the guy who went to get just a visitor visa to come visit the U.S. and the officer, because he had a fiance here, and the officer's like, "Well, are you gonna stay if you like it?" He was like, "Yeah, if it's nice." Visa denied. I mean, innocuous things like that, because we are dealing with federal officers, But it's so easy to just kind of, I'm just not going to worry about it, and so some people don't take it strongly enough.
Yeah.
Versus some people. Yeah. Granted, in your situation, you were, a legal professional. I get it. But sometimes I tell my clients, like, listen, immigration law is like WebMD. Like, you've got to get off the internet because you're going to be convinced you're dying of cancer, and it's a work permit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is a lot of people self-diagnosing, a lot of people trying to figure it out, and it is literally one extreme or the other. Yeah. It is people who think it's not a big deal. Have had clients say, I don't know, they said I needed some kind of a visa to get into the country. And I'm like, because you do. It's a thing. Yeah. Versus, the person who's just obsessing about just his mom getting a visitor visa, to come see him. And it's like, she's going to be fine. Yeah. She's going to be okay. Yeah. So it's really interesting. And I think because we're dealing with everyday life, right? Mm-hmm. And so many different clients, it can be sometimes exhausting, right? But it's a lot more real world application.
Sure.
Than people realize until you're trying to take, a team across the border to Canada, and you're like, oh, this is really useful.
Absolutely. Okay, so last topic I wanted to visit with you about. So when you are going through the process of hiring a lawyer, an associate lawyer, what's something that you're looking at on the resume or in a cover letter? What stands out to you on paper that makes you think they might be someone you'd want to take another step with, maybe bring in for an interview?
I know this sounds ridiculous to say, but first of all, I think pretty much everyone goes through and tries to find a typo.
Yeah.
And if you find a typo, and this is not the same thing as something positive you can put. I get it.
Yeah.
But literally, if you see any kind of a typo like that, you're thinking they don't care that much. They're not going to pay attention. Mm-hmm. Pretty much all law, but especially administrative law, where you are filling out forms constantly. Mm-hmm. I mean, attention to detail is everything. So the first thing we we all do, I know it, is look and say, are there any typos in this thing? And hunt them down sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not even going to lie about that.
No, you're not the first to say it. No, I mean, absolutely.
And then I think in terms of what I'm affirmatively looking for, it's not so much experience. It does depend on, I think, what my need is at the time.
Yep.
There are times that I'm looking for somebody that does have a writing background, and that could be somebody who is on law review or an English major. There are times that I'm looking for somebody who is more of a logistician, critical thinker.
Right.
And so I would say that I really do review resumes as a whole. And I do review them for that particular opening that I have.
Right.
I do. So, and there are times that I've called somebody back 10 months after an interview and I'm like, I think I've got the right fit for you now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I think it's important then that the resume is a good holistic reflection of who you are.
Right.
I know sometimes people, will go through, and this might be more true in other industries, but they'll try to tailor the resume to that position. And I think there's merit in that. But I know that for me, I am trying to figure out who this person is and what their strength really, where it does lie.
Right.
And I happened, at our firm, we don't just have one straight path, up the chain. We have staff attorney roles, associate roles, senior. We have different types of visa processing that really do lend themselves to different types of thought processes. We have writing projects. There's a lot that goes on.
Yeah.
And so I will also look at a resume and, we're a big firm, especially for immigration standards,
right,
and say, hey, this isn't a fit for my team, but this might be really good for, this other legal team that's going on. So I do think it's important that the resume is a good whole reflection of your experience, interest, and strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And then how about in the interview setting? What has stood out for you in the past with strong interviews or not?
I personally, I'm a very engaged person with my team.
Yep.
I probably need more boundaries than what I have. I'm not going to lie. So I'm looking for somebody who can be engaging, relatable, can talk to. And a lot of that is also because so much of what we do, we deal with so many different types of personalities. We're not in a situation where you really just have one client.
Right.
In terms of if I'm working on a case, it's not just Bob who's my client. Bob might be the employee, but I still have to answer to Bob's manager and then also Bob's mobility person.
Right.
So there's a lot. Every case, there's 5 people I may have to answer to. And each of those people, obviously, it's a different repertoire that you're going to have.
Right.
So I'm looking for somebody who can handle personalities. On my team, we are very involved. There are some teams that, people may not have as much client engagement, especially depending on their experience. And so I think that some people are looking for, again, different things for different teams. I'm looking for people, I think, that I could teach just about anybody. Immigration law, I hope. Yeah. I don't know, maybe not, but I can try. But client skills are really difficult to foster and to get. So that's why I think being able to be engaging and be fluid during an interview for me is really important.
Yeah. No, that's great. And a good reminder too that, like you were saying about the different types of roles and teams and positions that you have, I think that's a good reminder for people, because I do think sometimes we do get in the habit of thinking about if you're applying for a litigation position at a firm, it's, you really need to tailor it down, especially for that. And that might be true in one case, but then not in another case. Like if they're going to then apply with you all. And so it's a good reminder, just kind of firm by firm, to be paying attention and to get as much information you can about what the opportunity is, who the interviewers are going to be, and what would make sense for them. So that's great.
Yeah. And I mean, I know at our firm as well, you may have an interview set with me and my team, and that may be what the recruiter, or whoever's scheduling it is telling you. But again, I may know that there is another opening,
right,
that I think you might be a better fit for. So
right.
it doesn't mean don't make a good impression, or don't, tailor yourself to where you're going to narrow down, your applicability to other roles for sure.
Yeah. No, definitely. All right. Well, we're near the end of our time. And is there anything that we haven't talked about yet, or that we didn't go as deep into as you might like, so that we could leave maybe one last word from you with our listeners today?
Besides an entire treatise on how cool corporate immigration law is,
right.
assuming my husband's right and nobody does really want to talk about immigration law all day,
right.
I would say just for everyone to know that I think leadership does appreciate people who work hard.
Right.
They appreciate people who really try. And if you are somebody who is willing to be engaged and show that you're willing to put what it takes to learn, to overcome that lack of knowledge, I think that people undervalue how much that's appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, loyalty, hardworking, those seem like old values, but they really are appreciated in present day.
Yeah.
Integrity, it really does matter. And so I think everyone just, please, if you feel frustrated, keep working hard, and people are going to appreciate it.
That's great. All right. Our rapid fire questions to end our time. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Okay. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Willingness to try.
Love it. What habit has been key to your success?
Always assuming I'm wrong and always trying to look up an answer to prove it.
To prove yourself wrong. I love it. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
We have a dashboard that our company has developed through our technology. We have a proprietary software.
Yeah.
And I look at it all the time for all my team members.
Cool.
So
in-house
our own Cobalt app. Yeah.
so I can't link to it to get people to go buy it or look at it or research it.
I'm so sorry, everybody.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Good to know. What would you list first on the interests section of your resume?
It would probably, if I'm being perfectly honest, it would have to be hip hop music.
Hip hop music.
Yes, it would have to.
Like listening, dancing, concerts, any
listening.
Yeah.
Listening. I'm specifically a huge Jay-Z fan.
Awesome.
So, yeah. I mean, if I'm just being honest, that's probably what it would be.
I love it.
And if you had that on your resume, I would absolutely give you an interview.
All right. You guys heard it. Add that to your resume. Although I will tell you too, to be prepared to be asked about it and be able to speak intelligently about it, or you will show yourself as inauthentic. On that for sure. All right. Last one, your favorite legal movie.
Legally Blonde.
There you go. Yeah.
It has to be.
That is a popular one for sure. Awesome. Well, Jessica, thanks again so much for taking the time today to come on the show. We appreciate it and wish you and your firm all the best.
Thank you. Anytime. Best of luck, everybody.
All right. My thanks again to Jessica Mullins-Ta for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you are interested in any of the opportunities that I mentioned at the top of the show, or you just want to visit about what's going on in the market and what else there might be out there for you, please get in touch with me. I would be happy to visit with you. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.